My name is Chris Selley. I'm here with journalist and public intellectual Septembre Anderson. We're going to talk a little bit about the situation in Baltimore this week, where cleanup continues after a day of violence in the wake of protests over the mysterious violent death of Freddie Gray in police custody. Septembre, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm going to quote from President Obama's statement on Tuesday. He said, "There's no excuse for the kind of violence we saw yesterday. It's counterproductive. When individuals get crowbars and start prying open doors to loot, they're not protesting, they're not making a statement, they're stealing." I just wonder, with so many people dying at the hands of police in the United States, is it reasonable at this point to expect or to demand nonviolence?
I think expecting and demanding nonviolence from protesters is a point at which Obama misspoke. He should be asking for an end of violence from the police. This is where this started. This started because a man's spine was 80% severed, his voice box was crushed. He died a week later, there were no answers. So he is speaking to the wrong people. He's speaking to the people who are reacting to violence, who are reacting to marginalization. He needs to ask the people who are doing the violence to stop the violence.
Does the violence help, though, in any way?
We need to realize that what happened in Baltimore didn't start with Freddie Gray. What happened in Baltimore started decades ago. We've got people disenfranchised. 85% of the students in Baltimore qualify for free or reduced lunch. There's poverty. There's a loss of jobs. There's so many different points of marginalization that led up to this point. Freddie Gray and the lack of response from the mayor, from the police, from everybody is what lit this match. We also need to realize that there was peaceful protesting. There was peaceful protesting, 1,000 people peacefully protested, whatever peaceful means, and 35 of them were arrested. Another time it started, drunk sports fans started hurling slurs, beer bottles, and things erupted. So in terms of what happened in Baltimore, it started, we need to know that it started somewhere else.
How much of the violence itself do you think was directly related to the anger and the frustration, and how much of it was just opportunistic? I mean, you give people a chance to riot, some people are going to riot.
There are people who are out there and they're being opportunistic. There are people who are out there protesting. And I think riot is a term that I would move away from. I would more call it a rebellion. It is a different form of protest. And also that protest, that violence that we're seeing, it's cathartic. These are people who feel so disenfranchised, who feel like they have nowhere to turn, who are lashing out. So am I saying that I agree with it? I'm not saying I agree with it, nor am I saying I don't agree. I see value in that violence.
What is the value in the violence?
It's a people who feel like they have no power whatsoever. They have no power to feed their children. They have no power to find jobs. They have no power to step out of their poverty. They have no power even to stop one of their own from being brutally murdered. They have no power. And it's just like Martin Luther King said, because lots of people like to quote him, but he said that a riot is the language of the unheard. These people are not being heard. How else are they going to be heard? Even when the Tamils were protesting, they were standing in front of the embassy. Nobody really listened until they went on the highway and they shut things down. So if you're not being heard, your own president, your own mayor, all of these people are not listening to your concerns. What can we expect from people who are living in a situation like that?
The situation in Baltimore, if you look at their most disadvantaged communities there, you mentioned it earlier, it's very difficult to compare it to really any Canadian city, certainly in terms of the Black community. Do you see lessons for what's happening in Baltimore and I guess in the U.S. in a wider sense for what's going on up here?
Well, when we look at the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not just people are being murdered by the police. It's speaking about so many different kind of marginalization. So we can see echoes of that in Toronto with the push-out, dropout rate of Black youth. We've got carding, which actually more people are being stopped per capita than we are seeing with stop and frisk in the United States. There's so many points of disenfranchisement. Unemployment is different. We have unemployment disparities. There are a lot of echoes that we can see there, and it would be beneficial for us to learn and fix our problems before we have something like that on our hands.
Conservatives are clearly much more skeptical, I think, of the police than they were, say, 10 years ago. Do you think society at large, I don't know, Canadian or American or both, is finally beginning to come to terms at least with the level of violence that police are capable of doling out?
I don't know, because there are many people who are extremely supportive of the police. So I don't know if people are becoming more aware. I don't know if this is just a flash in the pan. I don't know if this is a watershed moment. I don't know what this is. I would hope so, but there are levels to this. Even when we think of the youth prison in Brampton, all of that money to imprison youth that we could use to feed youth, that we could use for better schooling, that we could use for better childcare, that we can use for so many other things. And we're imprisoning youth. And then you see a shift of populations when Regent Park is getting rehabilitated. A lot of those people are moving to Brampton, closer to those youth jails. So I think policing is a small piece of it. We have to look at the larger prison industrial complex and all of the ways in which we've got this cradle to prison pipeline for Black people. It's more complex, and it's good that some people are waking up.
The video of police shooting Walter Scott in the back in South Carolina, then apparently planting a taser on him, then we know lying about basically everything that happened afterwards. I mean, that's one of those moments where it seems it's so hard for anyone. Like, you have to be so set in your ways to look at that and see anything other than, you know, just a horrible situation. I wonder what you think about the images, and if you have any thoughts on body cameras, because that's one of the, you know, one of the solutions that people mention. You
would think that we would say, here is you on video doing a thing that is against the rules and against the law. This should stop things. But we haven't seen that happening. There has been video, and yet we haven't seen that kind of action, that kind of change. Are body cameras a step in a direction that's possibly the right one? Yes, but there are lots of police who turn off their body cameras or cover them, just like the G20 when people covered or took off their name tags. So is it a step in the right direction? Possibly, but we need to look at the underlying issues here. Policing has a racism problem, and we need to deal with that. They have a racial profiling problem, we need to deal with that. So putting body cameras, I feel like it's putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound.